Hello then, welcome back. So as you can see, the boat is almost done now. There's just a few little bits, these boxes, these crates to do the sails. All the rest of it was done using the exact same technique as the anchor there. If I had any issues with scaling and stuff, I basically just copied the UVs. I just selected the parts I wanted, and just say if they were sort of the UVs for that was a bit screwy and I couldn't get the texture right, I'd basically just select the polys I wanted and just right click on the Sampan UVs. And if you remember, the Sampan UVs are this nice Atlas projected one. And then I'll just copy them into the working layer, and then I can just basically just scale them. And if you look at this now, like there's the UV space 0 to 1, and you can see I've got UVs all over the shop. So this boat is made up now of parts which are UV'd using this standard set here, and this other set there. And I've been having to think about these boxes, and I'm not sure if I'm even going to leave these boxes in. I might delete these and just sort of put little markers on here within Unity, and then when your model actually goes between the cities and picks up sort of commodities to transport, then actually put in, like say you're buying apples or something, actually sort of puts a sort of barrel of apples actually on your boat, so you can actually see the different type of wares you're carrying. So for the actual boat itself, I might just actually just delete all these. I'm not 100% sure yet, or I might not bother even touching. I might just leave them like this for now, just so we can have a play about within Unity. So I still need to do the sails and this sort of cover, this roof covering for this part where the sort of pilot would sort of sit there. So the first thing we're going to do these the sails. Now they're going to be the same material, the sails and that cover, but they're going to be scaled slightly differently, I think. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do them as separate materials. So I'm just going to select them ones, the sail canvases, and I'm just going to hit the M key there to make a material, and I'm just going to type in sail canvas, and we're just going to just hit OK there. And now if we jump over to the shade tree, this is nothing new here. You can see how many materials I've had to make. So if you loaded this in, if you export this model as it is now, and you took this into Unity, there would be maybe 300 draw calls just for this one model. So it's not the best optimized. If you can't find what you're looking at, you can always do filter on selection. Um, okay, so sail canvases. This is the material we're currently looking at. So I'm going to go add layer, and I'm going to load in an image. Now within your CG textures, you've got one here called fabric plane. So I'm just going to open that, and you can see that's a bit large. So we're going to go over to the properties of the fabric, and I'm going to go into the texture locator there, and we're going to just play around with this wrap level. So I'm just going to hit this just to turn them on equals, just so I've only got to change one, and it will scale the other one automatically for me. So you can see as I'm moving one wheel, then the others are moving. So I'm going to go up to about 10 times repeat on that, just to give it that like fabric. Okay. So as that's just a case of me changing a wrap value, I can use the original set of UVs here, the Sampan UVs, to do that. I haven't got to remap it in any way, so I'm gonna leave that like that. So I'm gonna say that's done. And now for this piece down here, these that's going to be like a wooden strut. So I've got that piece there. Got that piece there. So just a bit sausage fingers there. That piece there. I'm choosing the up arrow key just to, as long as you select 2 so it knows what direction you're going in. So there's my wooden braces light, so I'm going to hit the M key there. I'm going to call this roof cover wood, and we're going to go over to the shader tree there. I'm going to add an image, and I'm just using my rough wood standard type job in there. Now we're hoping we're going to go to the same again, the wrap value. We're just going to, because the grain, to be honest, isn't really going to matter which direction it's going in, as long as it's the same sort of scale as the grain along these pieces here. So I need to go a bit bigger, something like that, just so it's, you can't really see the blend. And luckily the grain's going the same way as that would anyway, so that'll do for that. And then these last pieces, I'm just going to select over there. We're going to go over there, and then just in case the boat is ever on its side, like washed up on a beach or something, we are going to just map these internals. Okay, so we can put the material on the same as we've done there. So we're going to use, and we hit the M key here. So I'm just going to call this roof cover, and then I'm going to open up load another image. I'm going to load in this fabric. So yet again, we're going to go over to the texture locator. We're just going to stick 10 in. Now that's fine and dandy for that, but I also thought we could perhaps put some pattern and some stripes on here. Maybe it might look quite nice. So I'm gonna. This is just a little. I don't know if this is going to work out. So we're going to do this as a little on-the-fly experiment and see how it works. So what I'm doing now, and you'll see this is where different sets of UVs can come in handy. Okay, at the moment for the roof cover, I've got this material, and that's linked currently to the Sampan UVs, and that's this nice laid out set. Now if I want to put some stripes on here, that might not work. So what we can do, if I add a layer, if I add load image, and we just load this stripe pattern in. Okay. Let's just up this. Let's see what we can do. Okay. So what's basically doing now, you've got this image here, which is just like a semi-transparent stripe there, and we've got this image there, and then on the blend type, we can put it on normal, or you can change the sort of the blend, how it sort of overlaps these two. Now let's just see if we can change. We can change that. So that fits in there quite nicely now. Maybe 6. You can change the sort of left and right position. Okay. So I'm happy with that. So that's added a bit of variety to that texture there without actually having to make another texture. Now you can do the same for these sails. See, at the moment the sails are a similar colour to the wood, but what we'll do, we'll just go over to the render tab and just see how that's starting to look. See, I think that's starting. You can ignore the gloss because this gloss speckle is not going to be coming over to the Unity at all. But if you want to see that within the render here, if you come over to material, you can just turn the specular down, and I'll do the same for the sail canvases. We'll just put 0 in there, and that'll just basically dull it up. And see, I think that looks quite nice. And the good thing about this overlay set here, like we're putting a sort of an image on top of another image, is that we can do the same for these sails, and then we can do that in game, where if you're like a part of a set clan, you might have like a symbol, or you might have a different sort of patterning on your sail compared to if you're from a sort of a different clan. So that's the sails done. So all we have left to do now are these boxes and this little piece on the end. That's just going to be a flat piece of wood strapped on there, so, or metal actually, just stuck on there. So we'll just select them two, hit the M key. I don't know what that's called. They've just called these side pieces. That's not very descriptive, I know, but I've got nothing else called something similar to that, so we're not really going to have an issue. And then we're going to go over to the texture locator again. I'm just going to now, when I'm changing one, that's obviously changing the other one differently. It just goes to a different part of the UV set. But if you want to fix that, you can just sort of remap this to another sort of, you could make it called like side pieces left and then side pieces right. But to be honest, you're never going to see it from this angle anyway, so I'm not really worried. That's more, them sort of pieces are more for if the boat is ever, like I say, stranded on a beach or something. This last little piece here, the rudder bracket, I'm just going to give this a, what should we put this one as? Probably that wood again. So as you can see here, that even though I've only shown you like me doing the anchor and these few little bits, you can see it's not, the texturing is not really that complicated. And if you can't get away with just coming in here to the actual projection and changing the wrap levels, you can always, like I've done before, just copy those UVs into another set. Then you can do what you like with them, and you can move more, scale them, or rotate them, and it's not really going to affect anything. So now for these boxes, I'm just not sure what we're going to do with these, but for now I am going to I will just put something on them just in case we never implement that add-on things, but I think we will implement it. So but just for, and I'm not even concerned at all how these look. I'm just I just want them something other than white, to be honest. Let's just see if we can just get rid of all these in one foul swoop. Like I said, I don't really have any inclination about how good these should be. I just don't want them to be grey in game just for now. Okay, so they're done. So that's pretty much all the objects. Let's have a quick look around here. That's the whole model now pretty much mapped. Let's just do a quick render of this and just see how it's coming out. Now, this is a good indication. Just it's not how it's going to look in game, but you get some nice lighting on here now, and you can see the sort of materials in a lot, a lot better detail than they are in the sort of preview window in the editor. So I think that looks as good as we're going to get, basically. So we are going to have to split this model up a bit. Like the rudder section, I need it as a separate model, just so when the boat turns we can move this around. And the same with these two pieces, they can sort of spin as you're moving, but I'm not worried about that for now. Okay, the next thing we've got to do regarding the textures is the ambient occlusion pass. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make sure we've got this saved. Now, we're going to use the UV set of it being broken up. Let's just go over to the shader tree and just click off any of these materials just so we can see the polys here. So we're going to use this set to do the ambient occlusion pass. So what I'm going to do, I've got all these materials in there. I'm going to basically make a sort of a big overall material, and then when we start baking, they all get baked up. But I'll talk a bit. I did mention the shader tree in probably most of the Modo videos now, so you should be getting a good grip of how this works. But I will go over it again. The final color here. Okay, we're going to change. We're going to right click on this, and we're going to change this to ambient occlusion. So now, if you go over to the shader tree, I should do a render. You'll see now it's using the ambient occlusion output as opposed to the final color output. So we need to basically make one of them nice split up Atlas text UV'd versions of this ambient occlusion map. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to come over to the UVs and make sure it's selected there. Now, the thing you need to, I'll just abort that, when you do render, make sure you've got your Sampan UVs there selected, and then when you go over to the render tab and you do bake to render outputs, it'll basically bake whichever UV set you've got there using whatever render output we have selected. And if you remember just a minute ago, we changed it from final color to ambient occlusion. Now if you look up here, the size of this is 900 by 900, and that's just the standard render size here. So we're going to be baking all our final ones out now and compressing all these images, all these materials and all these textures into just one sort of big Atlas textured final image, just so then when we bring it into Unity we've only got one material instead of probably about 30. So I'm going to do all these at 4096. That sounds massive, and it is quite big, but we can always then scale it down later. And I've said this time and time again, if you start off by rendering one at 1024 and the sort of resolution in the textures is not good, you can never get it up any bigger. You can't then change it to 2048 just because that's going to get blocky, so you need the size in the first place. So we're going to come over to the render tab, select the render node there, go over to properties, and this frame width and height is the actual size of the output. So we're going to hit this little 0 just to toggle around to the equals. I'm going to put in 4096. Now we're back in the items, got the boat selected, got the list, got the UVs selected. I'm going to do bake to render outputs. Now this is going to take a wee while to go round. Approximately 3 minutes, 4 minutes. You can see here it is quite grainy and quite granulated. Not the highest quality ever. Now this can work in your favour or against you, depending on what you're trying to aim at with this ambient occlusion. If I'm doing like a final render, like of a sort of architectural visualization scene, I don't really want it granulated like this. But from a game engine point of view, the only thing I'm using this ambient occlusion for is to add grime. That's just a way of me automating the fact, because we are going to go around and start painting on all these materials. But if we can alleviate some of me painting grime with an automated process like making this ambient occlusion path, then all the better. So if it's a bit grainy, then that's all the better for the grime, to be honest. But what you can do, if you do need it a bit higher, if you come over to the actual node which says ambient occlusion there, and come over the properties, now that's these number of rays here. So if you bump this up to, say, I don't know, 128 or 124, you can go basically as high as you want. The more you go, then the better the outputs are going to be. So I'm gonna do this one at 128 there. And the range is basically how far the rays are going before they sort of run out of any sort of gusto, any sort of juice. So you can play around with these and you can get more grey or more white, etc. So we're going to come back on it. We're going to do bake to render outputs. Now it's going to take a wee bit longer now because I've doubled the amount of rays. So it's going to go from, say, 2 minutes to, like it's now going to take 4 minutes. And this is with a fast 4 gig quad-core i7 processor as well, so it's going to take a while. But as you can see now, it's nowhere near as grainy and noisy as it was before. And you can put this up to 1,000, or it just depends how long you want to sit here, basically watching this chunder away. But like I said, for what our use is, I'm going for just sort of a way of me automating baking grime in, so I'm quite happy with it to be like that. So I'll just pause the video while this is still going, and we'll come back when it's finished. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, that's finished there now. So what we need to remember to do now is just, even though you think it's done, it's all kosher, is just save it. So we need to make sure we save it. So I'm going to call this one ambient final. Okay. Now we can close that down. What we also need to do, we need to bake all these diffuse colours in here into a single texture like we just did for the ambient occlusion. So what I'm going to do above all these, I'm going to do add layer, add image map, new image, and I'm going to call this diffuse color. Now, I want 4096. There's going to be no transparency, so I'm going to turn off just to save a bit of memory there. Okay, so I'm going to make sure it's dragged outside of all these other materials at the top, because like I said before, with the shader tree, basically it starts at the bottom, so when you hit render, it basically does the camera, the lights, the environment, then it sort of plows up, just like a sort of any sort of a layer system like within Photoshop or others. And basically, as I'm looking at diffuse color with this image, when I start baking it, it'll basically go through all these below and also look for anything with the same type diffuse color. So what I need to do for this image here, when I go over to the properties, I'm going to turn off anti-aliasing, and I'm just going to make sure my UV map is set to my Atlas one, which is all nicely split out, not the working one. Okay. Now what I'm going to do first, I'm going to go through all these diffuse colors. I'm going to turn off any anti-aliasing, so I don't want any grain, or I want the images to be kept as clean as possible. Okay, so we've got this image ready made, 4096. I've got it selected. The boats selected. The UV map I want to bake it to is in the texture locator. I'm just going to right click, select bake to texture. And now that'll go around. As you look at the images forming here, you'll see it's taken all those different pieces I made and it's basically mapping them all to that UV map I selected within this image in the properties there. This is the Sampan UVs. So all those UV islands and polys I copied out into that working UV layer, so I could sort of change them and rotate them and scale them more. It doesn't matter about any of that, as long as you finally then bake it down into one final UV sort of laid out version like this. So once this is done, we can basically delete all these materials and just create one material just called like Sampan material, and copy this image into it, and then copy the ambient occlusion image into it, and then you'll have the same model as you can see here with just one material. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create, in the next part, we're going to create another 4096 image called Grime, and we're going to go around and we're going to paint some old moss and dirt and scratches and things on the boat. And then if you want to add paintwork on the boat and some bits which are coloured, which might be quite nice, you might add some, because they were quite colourful actually, those boats in Asia at the time, like in Japan and China and things. We might add a bit of you always just create another then 4096 layer called sort of paintwork, and start colouring, and then we can just at the end we'll create one final 4096 called sort of a final colour, and do exactly the same as we're doing now, and just bake the ambient occlusion, this base colour, the grime and the painting into that one final colour. So that's basically the end of these texturing parts for the moment. We'll just let this run just so you can see the final piece. See, even those scaled stripes, you can see us kept them correct. And you can do the same. This is just one model, but if you've got, say, like when we come to do some of the buildings for the game level, there might be 3 or 4 different types of the same building. So instead of having 3 or 4 like sets of textures like this, we can actually combine the 3 or 4 buildings into one UV map and one image. So then we can then draw all those 3 buildings with just like one draw call. So Modo's a great piece of software for doing this sort of image manipulation. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make sure this is saved. Now I always do this just through habit, just sort of copy over it, just because there's many times I've hit close and it hasn't saved it. Okay, now this now here is using this my new image, because all these other ones are just being overridden by this new one. So as you can see now when we're looking at it, you can see the grain isn't quite as crisp as it was when that was all split into individual textures. But to be honest, when you're zoomed out any sort of distance, you can't really tell. And even now, if I scale this down to 1024, you'll be surprised how good it will look. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this section on texturing, and I'll see you for the next part when we get into the painting. So bye for now.